Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Leadership in Aviation Podcast. I have found a gem today for our podcast. Sally Glenn Lee, is an icon in aviation, and I am so thrilled to be tapping into a 50-year aviation career and finding some tips and hidden nuggets that I think that you can take into your career in aviation. Sally, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Renee. Thank you.
Well, I've looked at your biographical sketch and know that you started with aviation at a very young age in not an uncommon place in a Piper Cub that your dad owned. Tell me about what aviation meant to you as a little girl.
Well, growing up in a small farming community, I may have gotten as far as Indianapolis, just across the river, but no travel. So I knew that there were more things out there that I wanted to see, and I loved airplanes just in general. My father's plane, because we lived in a farming community, it was housed in a barn, and our runway was a field. So I felt like I was in the old days of flying, which was very exciting to me. And if there was an open seat, I was in the airplane with my dad. So he gave me this love of aviation, and he was entrepreneurial. So what he also gave me was try things, do things, have experiences. And then on my mother's side, who was an entertainer with her siblings, they were called the Moorhead Merrymakers. They were entertainers. So in my world and in my thinking, I said, well, okay, I love the airplanes. I want to go see more things. But my mother taught me how to be entertaining, loving people, enjoying things, being independent. So I felt like those two things went together, and I pursued that very quickly, or as soon as I could. But one thing my father said to me was, yes, I would like for you to pursue what you want to do, but on the other hand, you must have some additional education. So I went to school in a small college in Indiana, Vincennes University, and something happened very subtly, but it impacted my life unbelievably. The school was small. The president of the university was almost like a parent to every student that was on the campus. He knew that I was going to school because my father asked me to, and I did pursue elementary education. So in case that didn't work out, I had another opportunity to have some type of work. But he knew that I was going to do that. And I have to tell you a little story that I think you will get some chuckles out of. I was so skinny and thin when I was that age, and I had to weigh a weight that could open exits on an airplane. And so I didn't weigh enough to be hired. So the joke around the college was, okay, the next interview you go to, let's put some little fishing weights in the bottom of your skirt. So that was sort of a joke, but I think they may have been serious if they thought that they could get by with it. But I became not only independent at Vincennes, but I also learned from Dr. Beckus, who took me under his wing a little bit and said, you can do whatever you want. It's up to you how you move forward. So that came through my entire life. There was something that came available to me, even if it wasn't something I thought I wanted to do. If it was an opportunity that would help me grow, I took that opportunity. So a lot of this started, of course, with my dad and my mother. And then Isaac and the team at Vincennes University gave me an additional confidence that, oh, you don't think you're good in math? Well, you have to take it, so do your best. And I thought, what a great way to look at it. So that's what I was not an A student. In fact, I was lucky in some of my classes to get through them. But what I want others to understand about that is you still have to go through the things that you don't want to go through. And one of the things that Isaac Beckus said to me was, you have to understand that life is full of opportunities, but you have to take them all to get where you want to go.
I
So
love
I did
that.
that.
So
Yeah.
one of the opportunities that you took was to become one of the very first flight attendants at Southwest. And I think that's what you were talking about, loading your skirt with fishing weights to be able to pass weight to become a flight attendant. And that was in the days of short skirts and go-go boots and just fun on Southwest Airlines. Will you tell me a little bit about what it was like at the beginning in that airline?
It was fantastic because, again, the leadership at Southwest said things like, we want you to have fun on the airplane. We want the customers to have a good time. We want them to return. We need you to work the hardest that you can in following those guidelines. So we were allowed to be ourselves. And if we wanted to wear rabbit ears at Easter, okay, do that. One of the things that we also did, my crew and I saw in the paper that it was macaroni week. So we decided for one of the weeks in that month, we were going to make a crown covered with macaronis. And we would, on each flight, we would pick someone to be king or queen of macaroni. And people were like children. They were so excited. And we were excited because it was so much fun. We kept saying, maybe we should do something else like this. So we continued to do fun things on the airplane. And I think the leadership also understood the customers. And even though a lot of people said you girls were used as sexist type individuals, we didn't feel that way. Hot pants were what was being worn, and we were the love airline. We had love potions for our drinks, and we loved every minute of it. We loved our leadership. We were in a tiny place when we started. Everyone was in the same place, and if you've been to Southwest, their offices now, that is beyond where we were. And Lamar Muse, again, I use him because he was the president at the time. He said, we won't spend $1 on something that doesn't help us move forward. So another lesson learned, you don't just go spend money unless it increases your goals. So he was very good at that. And then of course we had Herb Kelleher, was really a very exciting person, and he never forgot you, and he knew something about everyone that was in the company. So it was a way to learn really what we were doing with the customer, be a part of the family. And Southwest, obviously, as you know, has grown to quite the airline.
I've been in those headquarters, and there's actually a bridge that goes between one building and another. That is certainly not all in the same place anymore. It's a pretty astounding legacy that you got to be a part of the beginning of. But that was really just the genesis of your career. And as you progressed in your career, you didn't stay in the cabin checking seatbelts and giving oxygen instructions and making macaroni crowns. For a tremendously long time, you went on to become an innovator and a recruiter and really an icon in the industry. Can you talk a little bit about the progression of your career? I think there's so much depth there. I want to capture some of it.
Okay. I'm going to quickly go through the fact that I did move to several carriers and gained experience from each of them, and they gave me something that I could use everywhere I went, including contract negotiations and things of that nature. I like starting companies, so I started several companies. And but what you're talking about is my last airline was with JetBlue Airways, which again is another wonderful airline, and they've done unbelievable things. And what I found, there's always a way of a method of recruiting, but I found when I was in in the actual interview with individuals, I tried to make them feel comfortable enough for them to talk about themselves, not just say, well, is there something I don't know about you that you want me to know? Sometimes they'll tell you things if you just let them have the opportunity to talk about themselves, and you will find the right people. But I want to share one with you that I feel very good about. There was a young man who came in for an interview, and he wanted just a summer job because he was going back to school. And I said, well, okay, tell me about school. He did. He said, I hate it. I don't want to do that. He was in engineering. And I said, well, is there a reason you don't? He says, yes, I want to be a mechanic. And I said, well, have you spoken to your parents about it? He said, no, I know they don't want me to do that. And I said, well, here's what you need to know. We're not moving forward with the interview because you simply want a summer job. We're looking for full-time. And secondly, I think it is in your best interest to go talk to them and tell them what you'd like to do. He said, that's something that makes me feel better, because I really didn't want this job either. So we laughed a little bit and he left. He called me about 3 weeks later and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. He said, I talked to my parents and they said, okay, if that's what you want to do, we will put you into a trade school, and you can take the career that you want, and let's hope that works out for you. That was one of my favorite interviews, actually. So, and again, I got to do those sort of things at JetBlue.
I love that. Tell me about the companies you started.
Okay. Well, I left Southwest to go to American, which was in my early days, my dream airline to go to. Got a great deal of information about how the mega carriers do their training, their interviewing. So there was a company that was starting called Hawaii Express that went from LA to Hawaii, 747. They brought me in initially as a consultant, and then they said, would you run our in-flight department? And I said, oh, absolutely. So fortunately for me, most of the people that they had already hired had worked for United, TWA. They had some experience, so it was a little bit easier to start that particular airline. We did a great job, with a Pineapple Express, as they used to call us. And we learned a little bit more about the flying someplace that doesn't have the same rules and regulations that we do. Hawaii is laid back. Things are a little slower. So everybody had to kind of adjust to that. And at one point, another company was starting that was called Regent Air, which later became MGM Grand. But what this aircraft was going from LA to New York, and it was 32 seats with 5 crew members. But the reason we had 5 crew members is because we had a purser, we had a secretary, a nurse, a cosmetologist, and a chef. Everyone had to have a certain ability that was beyond just what they were doing in the cabin. So at that time, I was fortunate enough to work with Wolfgang Peck to help us design our meals. And it in itself was an exciting time, because most of the people that were flying with us were people in the clothing industry or in Hollywood, going back and forth to New York. So it was great. So loved every minute of it. Yeah.
You got to meet a lot of interesting people then, and you've met a lot of interesting people since then. Who are a few of the dignitaries or celebrities that really stand out to you as being exemplary or charismatic?
Well, the astronauts, Jim Lovell, Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan, they were, not only were they amazingly interesting, but they were so interested in other people. So people who have done things that are, to use a phrase, out of this world, they wanted to come back and talk about you, which I found very interesting. I mean, everybody wanted to know about them, but they were wonderful to be around. And people like I have to go back. They were Gene Cernan and Neil Armstrong came from Purdue University, and my very first airline was at Purdue, which was a charter company. So we had a lot to talk about just in those areas. But some of the other people were Bob Gilliland, who was the chief pilot of the Blackbird. He, another wonderful person who he knew everybody in the world and they all knew him, and he was such a gentleman. I said to him, I said, Bob, something that I think you ought to do in your retirement is maybe go around to the universities and talk to young men about how a gentleman acts, because he was such a gentleman that it was you felt like you were the star. He was not. But he was and we've stayed close with he and his family. He's passed since then, but he was another one. So many of the astronauts we've met and their families, some golfers that Arnie Palmer was someone that I spent time with at Southwest. And when you think of people like Tom Hanks, the Hollywood group, I've been fortunate enough to be involved with them one way or the other. And one of my favorites is Gary Sinise, who does unbelievable things for people, with people. And I met him through an organization that Tom and I were involved with called Snowball Express, which takes care of the children and wife or husband of military that have been lost. So being with him and watching him with the kids and the parents was fantastic. The last one I want to talk about was Louis Zamperini, and I'm not sure if you recognize the name, but a life that he had, his life was not what you would call fun. He had been captured. He was in trouble when he was a child. And after he came out of the being captured, his life started to change. And his wife helped him get to where he could be forgiving and all of that. And from that point forward, he started helping young people. So a lot of what has happened in my career with these individuals, they show me how much they're giving back to people when they could just be, sitting there being arrogant. And I think that was a learning experience for me also. That's amazing. They had things to tell, and they told them and they shared them.
And Louis' story was in the book Unbroken, I believe is the name of the book and the movie that he was a part of. What an incredible war hero he was.
Can you even imagine?
I can't even begin to imagine how to imagine the difficulty that he went through. And honestly, all of our servicemen and women at different levels have experienced a great deal of sacrifice. So I'm loving hearing you talk about what others are doing and celebrate other people who are honoring them. I think that's so important to the fabric of our country.
Right. And I do want to go back to the airline industry for a moment with that, because what I found in recruiting, if you let people tell their story, it's amazing how much they are actually doing for others that they don't speak to other people about. And one of my interesting interviews was with one of the general managers, and we're talking and we're interviewing this young woman, and the manager was talking all the time. And I finally said, okay, well, thank you, John. Now let's get back to the interview. And we all cracked up, and it became a much easier interview. And we did hire her because she had a fabulous story to tell us about her. So that's one of the things that I think has made my life so full, that when you get to be involved with people, and if you tell them the truth and you do it with some humor and help them find their dream, you're a happy person. And that's what I found with these individuals that we were just talking about, they were happy, and they all had things in their life that were very difficult to deal with, but they shared with others.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen that so often. I think one of the best antidotes to depression, even or feeling sorry for yourself or feeling stuck, is to get out of your own way and help others. And I think that we see that so often in aviation, is that generosity of spirit and that selflessness. And a lot of times that comes, especially as aviators, when we're having to keep in mind that there are other people in the air, right? It's not just about us, because if we disregard that, we're likely to cause an accident. And so I love that you pointed out the generosity of spirit and the others focus of people in aviation. I'm curious to know some of the other leadership traits that over a lifetime of watching leaders and different managers at all different companies in aviation, what are some winning leadership traits in aviation?
Be yourself, be true to yourself, know who you are, watch other people and learn something that maybe you didn't know that would encourage your opportunities. Take opportunities that maybe, as I think I mentioned before, you may not feel like that's something that you want to do, but it may help you grow into the place you want to be. One of the reasons when I left Southwest, Lamar said to me, he brought somebody in that was going to be running the company. At that particular time, he was letting me do some of the not only the training but running of the in-flight department. And when he brought this person in, I said, I guess I'm not doing a good job at this. And he says, oh no, not at all. And this line stuck with me, and I took it with me for my entire career. You didn't have enough experience to see what's coming. And I thought, at the time I was still angry, but after I had a chance to think about it, he was exactly right. I would have failed had he kept me in the position with where we at Southwest were growing. So I felt like he was, again, taking care of me as a mentor. So I went out and got these other experiences, and it just kept escalating to new positions. So be yourself and be tenacious. You have to be a little bit tenacious. Go for something. You don't get it, okay, move on. I just had a young man who I hired at JetBlue go to Southwest, and he was saying he applied for a position that he didn't get. And I said, well, in this industry, if you get it the first time, that may not be the right position for you. And I told him the story about Lamar and what he told me. So I think some of the other things that you have to be able to do is to respect others, including the customer, the passengers. I think those of us, especially at the beginning of Southwest and new companies, you get more freedom to do that. And one of the things my mother taught me was anybody that comes to your home, or in this case, anyone that came on an airplane that I was on, it was like they were coming to visit me. I had to welcome them into my home. And that's how I started training people of the other carriers, that this is your home and it's people coming to visit you. So you have to remember that when you're in that aircraft. But you also have to be honest with them. If something's wrong, we're going to tell them the truth. We're not going to make up a story. We're going to be as honest, but with integrity. And if someone needs to talk to you privately, then, let's be a team and everybody takes care of your section, and let's deal with it on a one-on-one basis if necessary. And now, I mean, I don't know how the young men and women that are in the cabin deal with some of the things they've been challenged with. It's very, very difficult.
It's a completely different world than when you were doing that. I really love something that you said, that Lamar said to you, and it reminded me of someone else that I know and something that she said. And she also had a career at Southwest. Her name's Tammy Jo Schultz. And Tammy Jo says, never let an offense get in the way of a good opportunity. And I love that. And you embodied that with Lamar's. Really, what could have been an offense, what could have been a setback for you, that you could have said, oh my goodness, I'm so offended at this, I'm going to go hide in a corner. You turned that around and said, oh, this is an opportunity for me to go make my mark somewhere else. I really admire that about you, Sally. Thank you for doing that and sharing that story.
Well, and I think the other thing, Renee, that we have a tendency to forget, especially when we're younger, because we don't have the experience. People who've been around for a while, they do have some good information. So you need to learn from them, even if you don't like what they have to say. And as I get older, I keep saying to myself, how many things have I been told at the time I was going, oh, they just don't understand. And then I get the experience and I go, oh my goodness, were they correct? I definitely needed to hear that at that time. So timing is everything for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wrote down a few things that you said were important, and I'm going to be doing some self-reflection on thinking about, do I exemplify these qualities? You said that you need to be authentic. You said that, and I use the word teachable, right? You need to always be having an eye toward growth, and you need to take risks toward growth. And I think that's particularly something that women need to hear, because men are a little bit, especially in aviation, which is a male dominated industry, they're a little bit more willing to put themselves out there and risk their career. And I don't know, do you think it's because they didn't have to fight as hard to get there? Or do you think that it's kind of a natural difference between men and women?
I vacillate on this one because when I grew up, and my mother grew up in the era where women just stayed home, took care of the children, didn't have goals. And yet they were happy. It wasn't that they were unhappy, but I remember my grandmother would get up at 4 a.m. to start the fire before my grandfather got up. And even as a young child, I thought, well, how is that right? That doesn't make sense to me. So I was questioning things like that when I was younger, but I think we were also taught to be nurturing and loving for everyone. That I don't know how I actually got to the point where I said, I'm going to do this. And even if someone is angry that I'm doing it, I knew where I needed to go. So I left and did these things. They weren't easy, but I think men were always pushed to do more, and they were given more confidence than women were. This is what women did. And when I was in high school, a woman either was a teacher or a bank teller or a mom or wife. And that was pretty much what you had as an opportunity, but it wasn't a long time career. Well, I chose to have a long time career. So I knew that I was going to have to move around. I was going to have to be where I didn't know anyone. So I had to really search in my heart as to whether that's what I really wanted to do. And as it turned out, that's what I wanted to do, and I did it. But yeah, I think men were more encouraged at younger ages. And even though I played some sports when I was younger, it was just sort of like, okay, well, we're going to go play softball. But it wasn't like, okay, now we're going to really teach you how to play it. We were just out there having fun. With the boys, as they were growing up, they were given the better equipment. Everything looked like it was better for them. With us, I think it was do the best you can, and if you enjoy it, great. And if you don't, then go back and do what you're supposed to do.
So I'm going to ask you, because I saw pictures of you with your granddaughter in a flight deck. I want to hear what the advice is, the career advice is that you give to your granddaughter, or that you would give to other young people who are just coming into the industry.
What I give to Tatiana is know who you are, be that person, be a leader, and be kind to other people. But as you go into a job, you have to learn to adjust to what the rules are, how you deal with them. And if you are unhappy in that job, leave it. Go where you want to be. Don't go just because it's a job and maybe you got hired. because I've seen too many people, and even today I see people who stay in the industry, hate their job, but are afraid to leave. And Tati, one of the things that we've talked about a lot, and she's 13 now, so we're doing a lot of prepping for the future. And she said, but I don't know what I want to do. And I said, then that's why we're going to try many things. And let's not just focus on one. We will find, or you will find, something that interests you that you just can't live without. You have to do that. And she's gone back and forth on a couple of things, because she's a little entertainer also. She likes to be in theater and singing, and I'm sure she's has plenty of TikToks out there that people have seen. But I have spent a lot of time telling her to be independent, but you still have to follow the rules.
I love that. I love that you encourage curiosity in her. Try lots of things. Figure out what you like, but try things. And I think that that's something that most people in her generation and even the millennial generation really need to think about. Is you're so young in your career that you have the option to try so many things. It gets a little bit harder as you get older to try new things. Your body doesn't adapt to new things as well anymore, but also your lifestyle doesn't allow as much for that. So I love that you give her that advice to try new things and to explore and to be curious. I think that's fascinating. Sally, I've loved having you on the podcast today. I just wonder if there are any other tidbits of wisdom or advice that you would want to give our listeners before we wrap up today.
What I would like to say to young people in general, and those going into aviation, it's really important that you understand what you're getting into and embrace it. And if you lose that feeling for it, please talk to someone about it and take another path that you know you can succeed in. Because there are so many things out there in today's world. I mean, young women have opportunities that we never had at my age. And, space is one that they're looking for young women to get into. So, and coding, things like that I don't even know what some of these things are, but I know that, like Tatiana, she's interested in all of these things. So I said, let's just start looking for them. And to those of you that are listening, it is important that you find out what you want out of life and taking care of that, but it's your responsibility, not for someone else to give it to you.
Oh, so good. Don't be entitled. Earn what you're looking to achieve, I think is vital. And thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Sally, it's been my honor and pleasure to have you on today.
I encourage everyone to go out, do things, and enjoy your life, because like you said, things change in your life as you age, whether it's physical or emotional or mental. So go and enjoy your life for as long as you can.
Well, thank you so much for being an inspiration to that. And thank all of you for listening to the podcast today. As always, would really appreciate if you like the podcast, give it a great review, share it with someone else. And you can follow me on social media at René Banglesdorf on most platforms. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Renee.